Hello and welcome to today's writing lesson. We're going to switch things up a little bit, and I want to talk to you about some common writing mistakes and see if you can identify them. But most importantly, I also want to talk about how you can fix these mistakes and really just try to avoid them altogether. So this is interactive English. So the one thing I definitely want you to do is participate in this lesson. So whether you're with me now live or you're watching this later, I want you to write your answers in the comments, in the chat, as we go through this and see if you can identify some of the different mistakes that we're talking about. So let me just tell you what I want to do first off. So these are the directions. So I am going to give you a sample writing, and I want you to read the sentences, read what I have for you, and see if you can identify all three mistakes. So in each writing sample, there are three mistakes. But not only that, I also want you to identify the common writing mistake. Like, what is the overall problem? What is the overall issue? And that's really going to help you try to go through your own writing and tell you what to look for, some of the things to keep in mind to help you improve your writing and help you correct some of those mistakes. So let's just jump in. I think as we go through this, you'll get what I'm talking about. So the first one is this right here, this little writing sample. So I'll read this as is. I'll give you a moment to think about, well, what are some of the mistakes? Write them in the chat, and then we'll talk about the overall problem. So here is the first writing sample. Neither John nor Mary are at school today. John is a good friend who always asks for help. I am happy to give my friend a hand from time to time. However, Mary usually tells me that he don't need my help and should do his own work. So in these sentences right here, there are three mistakes. And I want you to think about, well, what are the mistakes? And all of these mistakes are similar. And they would fall under the same category, if you will. And that's what I want you to think about. And this is the thing that I want, one of the things that I want you to look for if you're going over and looking through your own writing, whether it's an email or you're writing a letter, whatever it may be, and something to check for. So, yes, Siva says, okay. I think the one thing that stands out, which you can probably see, is that he don't. But there are some other mistakes as well. Yes, Vinda, Julia, excellent. So let me show you all three, and we'll talk about the general topic, the category. So what I'm really referring to, the three mistakes and what they have in common is that they all deal with subject-verb agreement. So the first sentence, there's that first mistake. Neither John nor Mary is at school today. When you're talking about that phrase, neither or nor, if we have a singular subject, in which case John is singular, Mary is singular, we're going to use a singular verb. Neither John nor Mary is at school today. And if it were a plural subject, like neither children nor adults, then you could use that plural verb. The next sentence, John is a good friend of mine who always asks for help. We need that S at the end. So who is referring to John? In this case, again, it's singular. John asks, who asks. And then down there at the bottom, however, Mary usually tells me that he don't. This is a common mistake that I see in writing, but also in spoken English when people want to use that negative and they're talking about he or she, and I'll hear people go to and use don't instead of doesn't. So just something to keep in mind. But the first common mistake that I often see when it comes to writing is just subject-verb agreement. Does the subject agree with the verb? And that's something you should look through as you go through your writing to make sure that they do agree. The next one, okay, excellent. I think a lot of you got that one. Perfect. The next little writing sample that I have for you is this. Please let me know when you're ready to talk. I think there is much that we need to discuss. It's been a difficult time for both of us. to be honest, I don't know if I can forgive you for your many mistakes. Okay, so if you're just listening to that and you're just listening to me say this, you might think, well, I don't think there were any mistakes. But we're talking about writing, and there are 3 mistakes in this little short passage right here, and they all have one thing in common. So what do you think? Can you find, if you can find the first one or the second one or the third one, it doesn't matter, then I think it'll help you figure out the others as well. So I see, excellent, some good answers. Takayao, good to see you. Stacy, Anawa, yes, all right. So the 3 mistakes all have to do with contractions versus possessives. So we're talking about, these are homonyms. These are words that they sound the same, but they have a different meaning. You're the contracted form, or you're the possessive form, or it's the contracted form, or it's the possessive. So in that first sentence, please let me know when you are ready to talk. You're ready to talk. We need that apostrophe. And this is, again, I think as you look through this, if you're able to identify it, that's perfect. But you wouldn't believe, again, if you're checking through your own writing, you might find some of these slight mistakes. I think there is much that we need to discuss. It has been a difficult time for both of us. Again, we need that apostrophe. So it's with an apostrophe there are 2 contracted forms. It could mean it is, or it could mean it has. You could use it's for either one, but in this case you see that past participle been. So that tells you right there that we're talking about the present perfect tense. It's been a difficult time for both of us. And then that last sentence, to be honest, I don't know if I can forgive you for your many mistakes. In this case, we're talking about your, the possessive form, Y-O-U-R. And one thing I do want to mention is that if you would like to get the lesson notes, if you're part of the email community already, I will send them to you. You can check your inbox. You'll probably see them there. But if not, and you want to get these lesson notes, I'll just throw that link in there. There's also a link down in the description. So let's look at our first pro tip. Okay, so if you are proofreading and you're trying to avoid some of the mistakes that I just talked about, subject-verb agreement, contractions versus possessives, one thing that you can do is read backwards. Now, when I say read backwards, let's say you write your email. I don't want you to start at the beginning, which is where naturally people start when they're proofreading. I want you to go to the very last sentence. Read that sentence, look for any grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes, and then when you're done, move to the second to last sentence. And the reason for this is because when you're writing, you're following a logical progression. You're moving from one idea to the next. You want to make sure that things are in order. You want to make sure that your writing makes sense. But in this case, we're talking about trying to find grammar mistakes. If you read from the beginning, then you start thinking about your ideas and what you're saying instead of just focusing on the grammar. So when you read backwards, what this helps you do is isolate the sentence so that you can only focus on grammar, spelling, punctuation, and you're not really thinking about the substance of what you're writing. You're not thinking about your ideas or your support or your points or your arguments. You're just focusing on the sentence and looking for some of those grammar mistakes. And that's a good way to find those subject-verb agreement mistakes, as well as, like I just pointed out, those contractions and the possessives. So the next little writing sample. All right. Right here. What do you think? I never really check weather forecast. Luckily, a friend told me it was going to rain tomorrow. I made sure to bring an umbrella when our group of friends traveled to the Yosemite National Park. There are 3 mistakes. They're all the same, but once again, they have this in common. And I think this is good. If you guys are able to point these out. And one thing that I think is also a challenge when you're looking at someone else's writing, it can be a little easier. When you're going back through your own writing, it's actually a little more challenging. So the 3 mistakes in this sample right here, they all have to do with articles, as some of you just pointed out. Anawet, Takayo, Sima. So here are the mistakes. It's just, we're talking about article misuse. And when I say articles, I'm talking about a, an, the, or just no article and not using an article. So I never really check the weather forecast. In this case, you're talking about something that, you usually do. I never really check the weather forecast. You could use the article a in this case, but mostly when talking about the weather, you're referring to the specific weather where you are. So I think it's preferable to use the. I never really check the weather forecast. Luckily, a friend told me it was going to rain tomorrow. I made sure to bring an umbrella. An umbrella. All right, we're going to use that article an instead of an umbrella when our group of friends travel to not the Yosemite National Park. It should be no article, Yosemite National Park. And I did realize somebody had pointed out, again, Stacy, good call. Travel, it should not be in the past. So that was another bonus writing mistake that I made. So it should be, I made sure to bring an umbrella. Oh, actually, no, because we're talking about the past tense. Sorry, no, it should be I made sure to bring an umbrella when our group of friends traveled to Yosemite National Park. So, luckily, actually, now that I think about it, this is, well, I don't want to give it away, but I've made some other mistakes with the verbs in this, which I will point out in just a second. But really, I wanted to focus on the articles in this case. And that last one, when talking about no article, we're talking about a national park. We don't use an article before that. Now, there are rules that you can follow when it comes to using a, an, and the, especially the. And I wouldn't say that you necessarily need to memorize these rules. And I'll get to the tip in just a moment to help you figure this out. But the next one, so this is talking about article misuse. Here's the next sample, and I apologize for those verb mistakes that I made in the last one. Maybe that was a little confusing, but we'll get to that in just a moment. So the next one, see if you can find the 3 mistakes. He spent much of his time studying finance because he was interested with economics. Perhaps it came naturally because he was great in math. He understood that people's spending habits depended to their income. So what are the mistakes in this writing sample, and what is the category? What category of mistakes am I referring to? And again, if you find one, I think it will be easier to find the other 3 as well. All right, so let me know, write your answers in the chat, in the comments. I see some of you already pointed out one of those mistakes in that first sentence. Excellent. So, Samasul, New Day, sorry if I mispronounced names. I just want to give a couple shout outs. Anna, Lolly, excellent. Good to see you. So, what I'm referring to, the mistakes, the overall category, is just the wrong preposition. So, that first sentence, he spent much of his time studying finance because he was interested in economics. If you're using that adjective interested, you're going to say you're interested in something. Perhaps it came naturally because he was great at math. Great at something. You're good at something. And then finally, he understood that people's spending habits not depended to, it depended on their income. So something depends on something else. One thing that I'll say with these prepositions, which can be tricky, is that sometimes more than one preposition may be used. At times it may alter the meaning a little bit, and other times they may just be used interchangeably. The reason why I'm pointing this out now is because I want you to look at that phrase, great at math. And again, I think in just general conversation, colloquial speech, you may hear someone use the preposition in when talking about a subject. Oh, he's great in math. But if you want a point of reference, and I wanted to share this site with you, and I've talked about it before, Ngram Viewer, this is a good way to try to understand the language and understand which words or phrases are more commonly used. And really, I just want you to look at the visual graph. I could put in those phrases, good at math, good in math. And looking at the graph right there, you can see that it's a lot more frequent, that good at math is more frequently used. And really, Ngram Viewer is a source that pulls different writing from the internet, whether it's news articles, academic articles, blogs, websites, and it just is a good reference for trying to understand, well, which one is more commonly used. So in this case, you can see good at math is the way to go. So the pro tip that I have for you is to read daily. And this is just a habit that you should really get into. So reading and writing are just so closely linked together. But the value of reading every day, if you can make that a habit, is that you're just going to passively learn this information, and you're going to absorb the grammar, the syntax, the style, the punctuation. And in case you're unfamiliar with syntax, that's really just referring to the order that words are used. So like if you have an adverb, is it going to go at the beginning, or are people likely going to use it at the end, or where does that preposition phrase go? That is syntax. And you're not specifically focusing on, again, the grammar when you're reading. You're just absorbing this information. So you're reading about, well, what articles are used with which nouns? Are you using a, an, or the? Which prepositions are going to typically follow certain nouns, adjectives, verbs? And you just absorb this information passively. So definitely, if you're not doing it now, I would highly recommend just getting in the habit of reading a little bit each and every day. The other benefit, right down here, is that it will expose you to a variety of writing styles. And that is valuable because it's going to help you find your own voice when you're writing, because we're not always writing the same thing. You might be writing a formal letter, you might be writing a casual email. So it's good to get that exposure. The next one that I have for you, all right, so let's look at some more mistakes, okay? So every day I get up and go for a run. I usually took the same route. Yesterday, however, I decided to go jogging in the hills nearby. I had never been there before. I really enjoy seeing the beautiful forest. Perhaps I will do it again tomorrow. So this actually goes back to what I was talking about before, when I feel like in that one sample, number 3, I had made a mistake. And again, the other thing is making mistakes, it's natural. It's going to happen. And I think it is especially difficult when you are proofreading your own writing. When other people are doing it, I think it can be a little easier, and you're able to spot some of those mistakes, because they're not your words. So yes, excellent. Anissa, Kira, perfect. Stacy, Sonia, very nice. And Vicky, Gustav, Svetlana, welcome. Good to see you. We're talking about changing tenses. And even in that sample before, I made a mistake in terms of talking about the future and then kind of switching to the past. And this is a mistake that people not only make in writing, even whether you're an English learner or a native speaker, it's a mistake that people make in spoken English as well when they're telling a story. So every day we're talking about a routine, a habit. We're going to use the present simple. I get up and go for a run. We're continuing with the present simple in that next sentence, talking about what you usually do. This is your routine, your habit. I usually take the same route. The next sentence, you see that word, that time word right there, yesterday. That tells you that we're talking about the past. Yesterday, however, I decided with that ed ending to go jogging in the hills. I had never been there before. I really enjoyed seeing the beautiful forest. We're going to use the past tense because once again, in the previous sentence, I had just said, well, I'd never been there before. So it's not something you regularly do, that you enjoy, and that you're familiar with. We're talking about, again, a finished action in the past. And then the next sentence, we switch to the future because we have that time word tomorrow. Perhaps I'll do it again tomorrow. So just something to keep in mind, changing those tenses. But again, look for it and think about it. And really think about those time words when talking about yesterday or a few days ago, tomorrow, at the moment. And those are indicators as to which verb tense you should be using. Then here is sample number 6. After going to the dentist, I learned that I have 3 cavities. The dentist said, you need to take better care of your teeth. He requested that I floss regularly and I should come in for a cleaning once every 6 months. Okay, so even as I was reading that, hopefully just listening to it, you might think that it sounded a little off and there was a reason for that. What do you think? What are the mistakes? And it is the same mistake that you will find. And again, it helps you identify this category. So just looking at this, you might think, well, there's maybe no mistakes with the verb tenses, or I'll give you a hint. It's a punctuation mistake. So what is the problem with the punctuation in this writing sample? Again, it's the same mistake. If you said punctuation, koyejo, Sonia, perfect, excellent. The mistake, perfect, Albert, Dina, we're talking about comma misuse. So comma misuse could be you're using a comma when you shouldn't. Perhaps you're using a full stop. But in all of these mistakes right here, I should have used a comma, but I didn't. After I go to the dentist, comma, I learn that I have 3 cavities. After I go to the dentist, after going to the dentist, that is my adverb phrase. When it comes before the independent clause, you need a comma to separate those. The next one, the dentist said, comma, and this is in quotes, you need to take better care of your teeth. I feel like this is what my dentist says to me when I go there. So again, the dentist said is that reporting verb. Before you give that direct quote, those quotations, you need a comma there. The dentist said, comma, you need to take better care of your teeth. He requested that I floss regularly, comma, and I should come in for a cleaning once every 6 months. That is a compound sentence. You have two independent clauses joined by that conjunction. And often they're joined by and, or, but, so. In this case, and, but you need a comma before that conjunction, after regularly. So I think you guys did a pretty good job with that one and identifying it. And the pro tip that I have for you in order to try to avoid making some of these punctuation mistakes, whether it's a comma and full stop, is to read out loud. So when you read out loud, even if you're reading something like a story or an article, when you read out loud, you're practicing the rhythm and flow of the language, because if you're reading an article and you see a comma, well, then you should take a slight pause. If there's a full stop, it should be a longer pause. And the same goes if you're reading your own writing out loud, you're expressing and voicing it, and depending on how it sounds to you, it could indicate that you need some sort of punctuation, such as a comma. And you may need that pause. The other thing it could help you do is if you just read through it and you don't take a breath, well, then that may indicate that you have a run-on sentence. And a run-on sentence is when you need to break things up and you probably need a full stop. Maybe you need to use a comma or two. So reading out loud can help you try to capture that rhythm and flow, and is a good indicator as to whether or not you may need to add some punctuation to your writing or even take it away. So reading out loud, another good proofreading, like best practices when you're going through your writing to make sure that everything is okay. Then sample 7, writing mistakes. So what do you think? And this, I don't think, well, we'll see how easy or difficult it is for you. Her colleague was late to the meeting. She was attempting to purchase some time in hopes that he would arrive. Clearly, she was not prepared to make the presentation on her own. This would certainly have a negative effect on their upcoming work evaluations. Think about the context, the situation. This woman is waiting. She's at this meeting, waiting for her colleague. But there are 3 mistakes in there. And again, I want you to think about the overall category, not just the mistakes. So identify the mistakes and then think about, well, what category would this fall under? Let me know. Let me know in the chat, in the comments. And maybe some of these may be a little more difficult than others. But I think if you find one, you can start searching for those others. So I see some good answers. Sonia, Amit, perfect. You gave some. Those are 2 of the examples when looking at this writing sample. So the 3 mistakes are right here. All right, we're talking about the wrong word. You're just using the wrong word. A lot of times this happens with collocations, words that are frequently used together, and you have collocations like a verb that's often used with this noun, and people may just use the wrong verb. So the first mistake in that second sentence, she was attempting, instead of purchasing some time, we're talking about the phrase to buy some time. And buy and purchase, they're generally synonyms, but in this case, it's a fixed phrase, to buy time, which means to delay, or you're trying to avoid doing something. You're trying to buy some time. So that's why I said think about the situation. She's in this meeting. She's trying to buy time because her colleague's not there. Clearly, she was not prepared to give the presentation on her own or do the presentation. Now, what makes this tricky is when talking about a presentation, I just mentioned collocations. You could use the verb make, give, or do depending on the context. So let me be a little clearer. To make a presentation would really be creating the presentation. Not delivering it, but creating it. And you're putting together the PowerPoint slides. If you're talking about give, in that case, you're really referring to presenting. And you're actually in front of your audience speaking, and you are giving the presentation. With the verb do, it can really refer to either one. Who's going to do the presentation, like give the presentation. Or you could say who's going to do the presentation, as in make it and create it. So all 3 of those verbs, are correct, but in this context, this specific context, she's at the meeting. I think it's obvious that in this case, they have to give the presentation. They are presenting. So I would say that give is preferable in this context, but you as well. prepared to give the presentation or do the presentation. And again, it makes sense why some of these simple mistakes are made when it comes to these collocations. It can be a little confusing. And then at the end there, this would certainly have a negative effect. Effect with an E is a noun. So that is what we need there, a negative effect with an E. A negative, effect with an A, this is a verb, to affect something. Starts with an A. So affect and effect, they're commonly confused words, different parts of speech. The next one, let me know what you think. This, I always say, oh, maybe it's going to be a little more challenging, but then you guys nail it. See if you can find all three mistakes. I think one of them will definitely be easy to spot. So I'll read it for you. Dear sir or madam, I'm writing to let you know that I submitted the proposal in the nick of time. The project should be a piece of cake, so I believe it will be completed within a week. My team is going to work hard to make sure the project is finished in a timely manner. Okay, what three mistakes do you see with this writing sample right here? As I said, one I think is pretty obvious, and hopefully maybe that'll help you identify the other two. If I want to give you a little bit of a hint, think about that very first line, dear sir or madam. What is that telling you? If somebody begins a letter or an email, dear sir or madam, and then that should help you find those other mistakes. So, Anawat, Julia, excellent. The one mistake I think is very clear. The others may be a little more difficult to pick out. So here are the mistakes that in the category that I was going for. Dear sir or madam should tell you that this is a formal message. It is either a formal letter or it is a formal email. And because of that, you really should avoid using informal language. So I see, all right, perfect. People got some. Stacy, Lolly, nice, you nailed it. Dear sir or madam, this is a formal message, a formal email. I am writing to let you know that I submitted the proposal. In the nick of time is an idiom. And if you're writing in a formal email or letter, I would recommend avoiding idioms altogether. They're more casual. So instead of you submitted the proposal in the nick of time, I submitted the proposal before the deadline. There are other phrases that you could use to finish that sentence, but I would get rid of in the nick of time. The project should be a piece of cake. Once again, piece of cake is an idiom. I would avoid it if you're writing something that's a little more formal, an academic paper, or like I said, something for work. So instead of a piece of cake, maybe you could use simple and straightforward, or just one of those. The project should be straightforward, so I believe it will be completed within a week. And then that last sentence, my team is gonna, instead of writing the reduction, you need to spell out the full form, going to. My team is going to work hard to make sure the project is finished in a timely manner. Now, even if I'm reading this and I see going to the full form, in my mind, I'm saying gonna. I'm changing that to the reduction. My team is gonna work hard to make sure the project is finished on time. But I would certainly avoid writing reductions. Sometimes, I know I say that, and sometimes you may see it if somebody's writing a text message or perhaps like song lyrics and you see people spell out these reductions. It's very informal. But the problem that I notice is that when people start writing these reductions, it then carries over into more formal writing, which can look really unprofessional. If it's something for work or school, you definitely want to avoid using those reductions. So just keep that in mind, this informal language. And the pro tip is just to know your audience. All right? Keep that in mind before you start writing. Who is it that is going to be reading your writing? And knowing your audience, it has several different benefits. It's going to help you decide the information that should and should not be included. It's also going to help you arrange that information in your order, the order of your ideas. And then that last part right down there, which is more connected to what we were just talking about, the wrong word or informal language, it's going to help you determine the tone and structure of your writing. Should this be a little more formal in using those formal words, or is it just casual? It's friendly. You're writing a text message to your friend. And in that case, you could just write it as though you're having a spoken conversation. It can be very informal. So just know your audience and know the situation that you're in and that you're writing. So here is a little bit of review, some of the common writing mistakes that I tend to find when I'm reading other people's papers or essays or letters. And I just want you to keep these things in mind. And as you're proofreading, these are the things that I want you to look out for and the mistakes that you're going to find. Because I know that people will go through and they'll just read it and see if they can find anything. I would recommend going through your writing, proofreading it, and only looking for subject-verb agreement. Go read backwards, go through, see if you can make sure all those subjects agree with those verbs, and go through each one. Proofread it a second time. Look for those prepositions. Make sure that you're using the right one. And again, because I don't expect you to memorize this, reading really helps and complements it. If you're unsure of which one to use, that's one of those times when you can just, hey, what feels right? Which word feels right? And same goes for the rest of that. Informal language, changing tenses. Just keep all of this in mind. And as I've already mentioned, if you'd like to get the lesson notes, check out the link down in the description. If you're already a part of our email community, I'm going to go ahead and send it to you. Thank you guys for participating in today's lesson. I feel like my hope is that as you went through this, it was pretty easy to identify. Like I said, if you can pick out one mistake, it then becomes easier to try and track down the others. But please, 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 always try to proofread your writing. Again, you're going to proofread, you're still going to make mistakes. I go through these slides probably about 3 or 4 times. And even before, as you saw, as I was looking through that one writing sample, there was still a mistake. There was a mistake with those changing verb tenses. So it's really difficult, especially if you're reading your own writing, to track down all of the mistakes. But one problem that I notice is that people will write something and they tend not to proofread at all. And I would definitely recommend it whether you're writing an email or even just an informal letter. It's just a good habit to get into. And keep in mind those pro tips. So thank you. It's good seeing you. Takayo, Lali, Julia, Simran, Kevser, Diego. Glad that you were able to join me today. Again, if you'd like to get the lesson notes, check out that link down below in the description. I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. So long.